All right, welcome to the special Friday news-breaking edition of Hannity. Now, the Joe Biden bribery, money laundering allegations scandal. Let me tell you, we begin with a ton of breaking news from the swamp all day in Washington. A pathetic new sleight of hand from Biden's clearly weaponized and politicized DOJ as evidence of corruption against Joe Biden grows with each passing day. Today, earlier, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, just rolled out a new strategy. Yep, to help shield the big guy and the entire Biden family operation, but especially Joe Biden, because today he announced the appointment of a special counsel to investigate possible Hunter Biden crimes. But, of course, he made no mention of President Joe Biden. Instead of appointing someone from outside of the government to lead this investigation, as by law, by the way, is recommended under Regulation 28 CFR 600.3, thanks to Greg Jarrett, Merrick Garland waved his magic wand and he just promoted David Weiss. That is the same federal prosecutor, the one who's been slow-walking the criminal probe into Hunter Biden for several years. He's the guy that allowed the statute of limitations to expire on multiple major felonies before, of course, then trying to put together that sweetheart, little deal with Hunter, no jail time, and tie it up with a neat little bow and cover it all up, a sweetheart deal that no one else would get. That, of course, rejected by the federal judge, who thankfully in Delaware actually read the fine print in this. It was a complete get-out-of-jail-free card, a blatant attempt to sweep all Biden allegations, Joe and Hunter, under the rug without ever implicating the big guy or forcing his beloved son to go to jail. Weiss was gifting Hunter a deal that involved 2 misdemeanor tax violations. By the way, his office had recommended felonies, and of course the deferred gun charge that his own office had been saying, no. And in exchange, buried deep on page 15, Hunter got a get-out-of-jail-free card, a sweeping immunity deal for a variety of tax violations and drug crimes, and basically every crime possible in this time period. Could never be charged ever again. And then the judge said, did you mean to put this in there? Oh, no, we didn't, Your Honor. And then the defense says, well, wait a minute. That's what we all agreed to. So let me be very clear. David Weiss is not to be trusted. This is a sham from the get-go. But don't take my word for it. 2 career IRS investigators, they were so appalled at the highly unusual way that Weiss conducted the entire investigation that they sacrificed their own privacy and careers to come forward as very credible whistleblowers, and they testified before Congress. Let's take a look back.
In November of 2022, the statute of limitations was set to expire for the 2014 and 2015 charges in D.C., which included the 2014 felonies for the attempt to evade or defeat tax and fraud or false statement regarding bereavement income earned by Hunter Biden in those years. The statute of limitations had been extended through a tolling agreement with Hunter Biden's defense counsel, and they were willing to extend it past November 2022. Weiss allowed those to expire. I don't claim to be privy to United States Attorney Weiss or Attorney General Garland's communications, but United States Attorney Weiss told us that he was not the deciding person, that he had requested and was denied special authority after D.C. declined charges, and that if California declines, he will have to request special authorities again. I understood the gravity of those admissions. Whether full responsibility lies with United States Attorney Weiss or Attorney General Garland is for Congress, the Inspector Generals, and ultimately the public to decide.
So who lied to the whistleblowers about the jurisdictional authority to charge? Did Weiss and Garland tell the truth, or did Weiss tell the truth to the IRS whistleblowers? Because he was telling 2 different stories. And why did the IRS whistleblowers claim both of them lied, according to what Weiss specifically told them? And why did Weiss let the statute of limitations run out on many of the more serious felony charges on Hunter? Why was Hunter not interrogated? Why was the Biden family also tipped off before a search that was scheduled to take place? Why did Weiss take 5 years to do practically nothing before getting embarrassed in that Delaware courtroom with his slap-on-the-wrist sweetheart deal that would have prevented any and all accountability on all of these issues as it relates to Hunter, and that would have flowed over to Joe as well. The House Oversight Committee, they knew, was discovering massive amounts of money and shell corporations and the number of members of the Biden family being paid tens and tens of millions of dollars funneled into these shell corporation accounts. Comer's committee says there is evidence that 9 Biden family members, including grandchildren, received these funds. I'd like to know, what did the grandchildren do for China, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Romania? What did Hunter do for these countries to earn all of that money? And after all of this, why would Merrick Garland appoint Weiss as a special prosecutor? Why? Because the fix was in. This is what we have been telling you for a long time. This is what a politicized and a weaponized Department of Justice looks like. With Hunter's plea deal dead in the water, Garland and Weiss, well, they would now be able to use this new special counsel investigation. That will buy them time. That will stall any future Hunter trial. They'll attempt, let's see if it works, they will attempt to block all and any congressional inquiries and let even more statute of limitations run out. But remember, they're not protecting Hunter, who, remember, was an admitted crack addict at the time while all these deals with tens of millions of dollars were happening. This is the Joe Biden protection program. Let me be clear on this. Merrick Garland didn't bring that up today, but he should have. This is now not about Hunter. This is about the President of the United States, who is now running for re-election and whose DOJ is going after Donald Trump with a vengeance. It's not a prosecution anymore. It has now crossed the line into never-ending persecution. And by the way, they want to cross the finish line in 2024 and not have this issue come up until then. And I'm sure that Merrick Garland's pretty confident that Mr. Weiss will be able to accomplish that. And the allegations, though, are a real problem. Real allegations about bribery, real allegations about money laundering in the form of these bank accounts or shell corporations. As documented in that 1023 form, that trusted FBI source, we know trusted by the FBI because they paid the source over the years hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, that source accused Joe and Hunter of accepting $5 million each from Burisma? $5 million they didn't want to pay. But the reason they paid was for protection filtered through these many shell corporations that the head of Burisma telling the FBI informant it would take over a decade to find out how they actually paid the money and unravel all that. Coincidentally enough, Biden did protect Burisma by getting that prosecutor, by leveraging $1 billion to get this guy fired in 6 hours, which he accomplished for the company that was begging Hunter to please, we need D.C. help. Shortly after Burisma executives demanded that Hunter set up that phone call with Washington, D.C. That was on December 4th of 2015. That phone call happened. And immediately thereafter, Joe Biden began the process of demonizing the prosecutor that culminated in the $1 billion being leveraged. Now, the Bidens are not exactly known for being the smartest people. Joe, of course, boasted about his quid pro quo after leaving office. Take a look for yourself.
I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
A son of a bee, they fired him in 6 hours, and guess what? As a result, well, let's see, Ukraine got the $1 billion in loan guarantees, and Hunter continued to get paid, enriched, the Biden family enriched based on Joe's actions, the very thing the 1023 form accused Joe Biden of. Add to all of this Comer's latest memo with bank records showing a whopping $20 million of money. This is his third memo, by the way, from Russia, Romania, Ukraine, China, Kazakhstan. We went into great detail last night, pouring into the accounts of the Biden family and Biden family members and associates. We now have photographic evidence and testimony from 2014 and 15 revealing that then Vice President Joe Biden, in fact, met with several of Hunter Biden's foreign business partners, either over the phone or in person. Beautiful dinners at Cafe Milano, including a corrupt individual from Kazakhstan, including the former First Lady of Moscow, a Russian oligarch who sent Hunter a whopping $3.5 million wire for consulting, along with an additional, later, $120 million plus investment in their real estate fund. And according to testimony from Hunter's business partner, Devin Archer, pictured here with Joe and Hunter on a golf course, also testified Joe participated, to his knowledge, in at least 20 of these phone calls that he witnessed with Hunter's foreign business partners. Now, of course, as most of you know, Biden was telling a much different story on the campaign trail. He swore over and over and over again. He never talked to Hunter, his brother, or anybody for that matter, that he ever discussed the foreign business deals at all. Never, ever, ever, ever. Take a look.
Mr. Vice President, how many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period. And what I will do is the same thing we did in our administration. There will be an absolute wall between personal and private.
Now, based on everything we know from hard evidence, Joe Biden lied, flat out lied to the American people during that campaign. And guess what? Those lies continued all throughout his presidency up until, maybe about 3 weeks ago. Take a look.
There's this testimony now where one of your son's former business associates is claiming that you were on speakerphone a lot with them talking business. Is that what?
I've never talked business to anybody. And I knew you'd have a lousy question.
Well, why is that a lousy question?
Because it's not true.
How involved were you in your son's Chinese shakedown text message? Were you sitting there? Were you involved?
No, I wasn't, and I don't know.
Were you?
No.
Why about never speaking with Hunter about
The only thing they can do is make up things about my family. It's not going to go very far.
Keep in mind, according to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, quote, payments or gifts to third parties, such as officials, family members, as an indirect way of corruptly influencing a foreign official, that would be illegal. Joe Biden doesn't have to be caught on tape pocketing a big wad of cash. He can still be guilty of corruption if his family members were taking that money in. Apparently 9 Bidens got paid, including grandkids. What did they do for that money? What did Hunter do for that money? Was Hunter even capable of working during this complicated time in his life of addiction? And let's not overcomplicate the Biden business model at all. Not hard to understand, or as now some are calling it, the Biden brand. Devin Archer told us that. Joe Biden and his powerful role in our federal government is the brand. It was not Hunter the brand. It was Joe the brand. Again, they definitely weren't paying for Hunter. Even Hunter himself admitted all of this during an interview with GMA. He had no experience in energy, and he's doing energy deals in Ukraine and China. Amazing amounts of money for somebody with no experience at all. Take a look. Hunter in his own words.
What were your qualifications to be on the board of Burisma?
Well, I was vice chairman of the board of Amtrak for 5 years. I was the chairman of the board of the UN World Food Program. I was a lawyer for Boies Schiller Flexner, one of the most prestigious law firms in the world.
You didn't have any extensive knowledge about natural gas or Ukraine itself, though.
No, but I think that I had as much knowledge as anybody else that was on the board, if not more.
In the list that you gave me of the reasons why you're on that board, you did not list the fact that you were the son of the vice president.
Of course, yeah. No.
What role do you think that played?
I think that it is impossible for me to be on any of the boards that I just mentioned without saying that I'm the son of the Vice President of the United States.
No. Oh, I was on the board of Amtrak and the UN food program, and I'm a lawyer. Any experience in oil, energy, gas, or Ukraine or China? No, none at all. Why do you think they paid you? I don't know. Maybe because of your father, the vice president? Probably. Wow. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.